Good morning, all of those out there in MBA land. Welcome to Morning Market Call. My name is Sabrina Beck. I will be your host today, and with me I have Rena Gould. Thank you for coming on the show with us today.
My pleasure.
Now, I understand before you came back to business school that you worked for the Economic Development Corporation of Utah. Can you tell us a little bit about EDC Utah and what they did?
Yeah, sure. So every state has an economic development entity of some sort, but sometimes it's on the state level, sometimes it's county level, sometimes it's city level. We had a statewide economic development purview, and it's actually a nonprofit that the Governor's Office of Economic Development contracts out its corporate recruitment functions to, and also funded by local businesses that have a big stake in economic development in Utah, as well as cities and counties.
Okay, so when you have clients come to you to seek assistance with making sure that they're keeping their due diligence with finding new locations for their business, what type of things would you do to help them?
Yeah, so it was essentially somewhat of a consulting role there that I had, and there are many aspects that they could be interested in. They could be very interested in real estate costs or utility costs, maybe geographical considerations, proximity, tax incentives is a big game that companies play, that states play, and then the value of the workforce in the area they're looking at, potentially getting into new markets and other considerations. So those kind of considerations I would help them through, as well as some others. My largest client was a financial services company that real estate wasn't a key consideration for, neither was utilities, but workforce value was incredibly important to them. And being able to know that there was a critical mass of people that they could pull from, and workforce that they could draw from, but not at too high a cost for them. That was important to their expansion. So geography wasn't a big issue, except for maybe the issue of time zone. They had to deal with clients all over the world. And so they had to make sure they could service those clients in different time zones. So they focused on Mountain West and Pacific Standard Time Zone. So that was kind of my competition in helping them come to Utah rather than another state, was kind of dealing with those kind of key considerations. And then the tax incentive game that oftentimes companies play and states play as well.
All these fun things that states do to try to get big companies to come in. You know, it's really interesting to be here in school and hear all these really cool things that we don't even think about before we come. What tips would you have as future business leaders that we need to consider when we go into these leadership positions and are looking for different areas to expand their businesses into?
Sure. So first of all, I would imagine that many of my classmates will actually have some type of role in the site selection process. So you'll probably be a part of this at one point or another. Maybe it'll be from the perspective of, you need to cut costs. How are you going to do it? Well, let's move to a different location and see what the options are there. Or, hey, we need to expand into a different market, or maybe we need to start to differentiate in some different ways. And site selection, you look at new offices for doing that. So it's probably these things will cross your plate. I would guess for the majority of students that would probably be the case. I think my advice on this would be to kind of it's a game. A lot of what companies do out there is honestly a game to get the states to kind of compete and the different entities to kind of compete and help each other to ultimately get the best deal from the place that they want to be at. So from that perspective, companies can get into the trap of just going for tax incentives, for example, or making a bigger deal about real estate or tax incentives or certain things that have cost components to them, but in the long term aren't the most strategically important things. So I would just emphasize that workforce value, getting what you need from the workforce, and at the cost that your business would sustain, is the most important consideration in this kind of knowledge economy, where most of the companies out there, the workforce is the most important thing, and not some of these other considerations. So I would keep that in mind, keep a strategic perspective on it, and have fun, because it's a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, Raina, so much for coming on and giving us a different perspective of the different aspects that we need to remember and take into consideration as we go out into the workforce in the coming years. And thank you for joining us this morning, and please join us next time for another episode of Morning Market Call.
Morning Market Call is brought to you by the Marriott School of Management in cooperation with the Brigham Young University Department of Communications. MMC is made possible by generous donations from Larry Tasjan and Gary Williams. This show was produced by Jeff Butler, David Wood, and Doug Mumford, with line producing by Beth Grimmett. For more information, please follow us on Twitter and Facebook.